getting a lot of questions recently about what exactly is generative AI and what does it mean when one of your favorite tools suddenly says it has AI and has the little AI sparkle emoji. Let's break it down. So the first thing to know is what exactly generative AI is and how it differs from other types of artificial intelligence and machine learning that have come before. So artificial intelligence and machine learning are intrinsically related, and they have been around for decades. Machine learning has long been used in automations where you're saying to a program, if X happens, then do Y. A really good example of this in a modern business context is the app called Zapier. There's another option similar to it called If This, Then That. And what these apps do is you can set it up to say, if something happens in software program 1, take this specific action in software program 2. So for example, you might say, using Zapier, when I get an email from this person or with this subject line, create a new project in my ClickUp account. That is an automation done by a machine. Machine learning is also what enables certain programs that crunch a lot of data. Like if you do marketing, think of your favorite SEO tool of choice that lets you see how your website is ranking for different keywords. Those apps, those programs use machine learning to process vast quantities of data and come up with the specific metrics that you need to see. That, however, is all very prescriptive. These apps are looking for a specific parameter that you set and then executing a specific action that you've told it to. Or these apps are processing data that's coming in and looking for specific parameters or creating a specific chart, graph, etc. A human, you or the person who creates the software you're using, has told via code and instructions the machine learning program to do something very specific. And that is all it does. Generative AI, however, is a predictive technology. Rather than simply executing, Y when X happens, it is statistically calculating what you, the user, are most likely to want or expect to happen next. It is in some ways a very advanced form of T9 texting. If you've never used a phone like this, as you can see, each of the number keys has 3 to 4 letters associated with it. So if I type 238, it knows that I am most likely trying to type the letter B, the letter E, and the letter T for the word bet. But it also knows that I am possibly trying to type the word but. There are limits to this particular kind of predictive text technology. These phones use a dictionary, not unlike the dictionary that powers your spell check on your iPhone or your Android. Every time you start punching those numbers, it checks the dictionary to see what words can be made out of the 9 to 10 letters on those keys that you're pressing, and then it quickly organizes those words by what is most commonly used in human speech. And if you tried to make a sentence using only the predictions that this keyboard gives you when you punch in numbers and letters, things would get weird very quickly because it only knows so many words. And that even happens with your spell check on your iPhone, your predictive text. In that case, your sentences that you get will make a little more sense than they would from this one because the smartphone predictive technology learns from you. It learns what words you personally are most likely to use and which ones you tend to spell wrong. So we can look at a tool like Zapier as a very prescriptive, defined form of machine learning and artificial intelligence. If you see X, do Y. Then we move on to these old phones where you are getting a little bit more flexible with the predictions. It's looking at multiple words, and then we make our way up to the smartphone where it's learning from you. Going beyond that, we move into the realm of tools like ChatGPT and Claude. These tools are also making predictions about what you want the next word in a sentence to be, but the predictions are pulling from a much more vast set of data. It's looking at basically all of the internet and every text that's ever been created. Because when these tools were trained, their engineers that made them gave them a treasure trove of data to crunch and analyze and figure out what parts of speech, what parts of images, what parts of videos are most likely to appear. What words tend to appear next to each other? If someone says, make a video of a woman drinking coffee, what kind of environment is she most likely to be in? Probably a coffee shop, because we see that in a lot of TV and movies and social media posts. These tools aren't meant to just come up with patterns based on a specific list, like the dictionary in this phone. They're actually mathematically determining what you, the user, are most likely to expect or want based on, one, what it has inferred from humanity and society based on all of the media fed into it, and two, how you are talking to it. So you and I could talk to Claude about the same topic, but if we're talking to it in different ways, which we would be because we each have our own speaking style, we each have our own lingo that we use, as a result, our responses that we get from it are going to be different. This functionality, all of the information that it's trained on, the way it responds to your inputs as the user, that is because of something called a large language model. And the large language model is basically made up of all that data. And this large language model is entirely mathematical. There is actually no intelligence here. It is predicting what someone like the user, like you or I, is most likely to want. And that is why sometimes it gets weird and it gives you answers that maybe aren't accurate, because it's not prioritizing accuracy, it's prioritizing making you, the user, feel like you're getting what you want. And that is because both just how the technology is set up to work, and also because if you feel like you're getting what you want, you are more likely to stay on the tool and keep using it. The more you stay on the platform, you may also be more inclined to pay for it, because ultimately these companies making AI tools are here for money. But it's just important to remember that when you see AI splashed on a tool, it's not always the same thing. So ChatGPT, Claude, etc., those are generative AIs. Some of the tools you've been using for years that now say they include AI, some of them are using generative AI, but others are still using more of that if this, then that, or just number crunching to produce a chart type of machine learning that we've had for decades. But because AI is a really popular term and people are looking for it and people are wanting to invest in it right now, a lot of companies have rebranded their longtime machine learning that they've been using for years as shiny new AI, sparkle emoji included. Ultimately, though, remember that it's not intelligent. Generative AI is to intelligence kind of like what a purple lollipop is to grapes. Like, it says grape on the wrapper, but we all know that the taste is actually the taste of purple, not the taste of a real grape. So artificial intelligence is similar. It's a simulation of intelligence, just like that purple lollipop is a simulation of grapes. It is fully synthetic, and there is no real true intelligence in there, despite the name on the tin. Another question I get is, what should you be asking about an app or about a piece of software that you've been using that suddenly says it has AI features? Like, how do you figure out if it's generative AI or not? And how do you know whether it's protecting the data you're putting into it or whether it's using it for training and other purposes? So again, remember, the goal of a company like those making ChatGPT, Claude, Meta AI, etc., is money. And to get money, the product that they build has to keep getting better at predictions, which means it always needs more data to run its calculations on. So when you use these tools, if you're using them for free, generally speaking, and there are some exceptions, what you type in and what it gives back to you are all retained by the tool. They go into building the tool's data set and further refining how it interacts with people. This process can technically expose your content and ideas to other people, and this can happen in two ways. There have been some instances where people have, say, chatted with ChatGPT and then created a link to share that conversation with one other person. There has been an issue where those shared conversations were actually shared publicly with the whole world, and they wound up in Google search and you could find them. Then the other way it can potentially expose your data and your ideas to other people is because it takes what you're doing and it pulls it into its training model. So over time, if you're using it a lot, over time, the outputs that other people are getting start to become a little bit more like your ideas and your style and your sound. Now, a lot of the AI tools you encounter today are actually built using one of the big platforms. OpenAI's ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, or Meta's Meta AI. You might be using a tool that's a different company, doesn't say OpenAI or Claude or Meta anywhere, but what's happening is they're paying for use of these companies' AI models and pulling that information and that capability into their own website or into their own app. So even if you feel like, well, I don't like OpenAI, I don't like Meta, I'm not going to use their AIs, you may inadvertently be using their algorithms and their AI through a different application that is using purchase agreement with like OpenAI or Anthropic to power their own applications. So if you're not sure and you want to know more about where a tool is getting its AI capabilities from, what kind of training it's doing, you can ask it the following questions. One, ask the company what foundation model they're using. The foundation model would be the AI that's powering it. Often, like I said, ChatGPT, Claude, or Meta AI. The company may say they've built their own proprietary AI, which is the case sometimes, but doing so is very expensive. You can also ask, how is your data used to train the foundation model? So a company might say they aren't using your data, but if they are partnering with one of these other AI companies to create the actual AI capabilities, it is possible that your data, while it may not be used by the intermediary app, is being pushed back to OpenAI, Anthropic, Meta, etc., for further enhancing the capabilities of that AI. There are also some steps that you as the user can take regardless of what the company says or how they're building their tools. So the first thing to look for is in the app settings, look for options to not train the model using your data. And they may phrase it as, use my data to help make this product better, or let the company use my conversations to improve user experience for everyone. Anything that talks about using your conversations with the AI, your data, you want to turn that off wherever possible. The next thing you want to consider is, are any other people exposed to your use of the AI tool? A big one is the idea of an AI note taker. These are becoming incredibly common. They're built into platforms like Zoom. So when an AI note taker joins your call, from your end, you're just getting a nice little summary of the call, what happened, maybe some action items you can take away. But what's actually happening is the AI is recording and processing and transcribing and analyzing that call, which means you are exposing everyone else on the call to recording by an AI tool. And depending on where you live, it may not be quite legal for you to record a call in any way without the consent of other people on the call. Like for instance, if I'm on a Zoom and I click the build in, just simply record this call where I'm going to get like a video afterward that I can share, Zoom will show a message to everyone saying this call is being recorded. It's a pop-up, it's notifying them, it's giving them the chance to say, hey, I don't consent to being recorded. With these note takers, typically they join the meeting just as another attendee, and people on the call may not know what that is. And a lot of times, even if they do know, they don't have the ability to remove your note taker from the call, so they can't fully consent to it. Be sure that if you are adding note takers to meetings, and there are definite, accessibility and usability reasons for doing so, but make sure that if you're doing this, that you are letting other people know that you're doing this and giving them the opportunity to consent or say that they don't feel comfortable with it. And lastly, know what you're putting in the AI tool. So if you are using an AI tool, especially if it's a free one, and you are feeding it information and that information is getting gobbled up into its training data, if you're feeding it your own ideas, that's one thing. But if you are putting other people's content into it, or content that you don't have full ownership of, or maybe content from your employer, that can be a breach of privacy, and it can be unethical, and it can also get you into trouble later on. Hi, Editing Emily here. So I'm in the process of editing the video you're watching right now, and I realized it was a good opportunity to show you a little bit of what I'm talking about in action. Okay, so I am using an app called Riverside that allows me to
get high quality audio and video when I am interviewing someone else for a project, but in this case, I'm just using it to capture audio and video for myself. So you can see, lovely screenshot here, or thumbnail here for you. But Riverside includes a few different types of AI and machine learning capabilities. So what I'm doing is I am having Riverside come through here. So Riverside has transcribed what I've said, and I'm coming through here and it's identified with a little squiggle when there are no words being said, like when that's just me pausing or whatever. And I can click those and I can delete them. Why do I always make the most insane faces on thumbnails? But Riverside does have some generative capabilities if you wanted to use them. For example, let's say I didn't like what I was saying here. If I wanted to, I could click on this video dub, and this is where we start to get into generative. It would be generating a sample of my voice based on my video, and then it would be altering the shape of my lips to make it match up with the new words that I've said. That is fully generative. So we're no longer just making a written transcription of what I actually said. We are creating something I didn't entirely say. So I personally am not going to be using that because I don't want to feed my likeness into a tool that's going to manipulate it. But this is another example of where it comes into, you have to really think about what you're comfortable with. For me, cutting out little snippets of the video or pauses and adding captions is something I myself have done for a long time. So by me using this tool, it's just another tool for me to do that. I'm not replacing anyone I would have hired in the past because I've always done that myself. But if I were going to, reshoot or want to have like a lot of cool graphics, you can do those using Riverside and some other tools. But in that case, I would either do it manually or I would hire someone to help me with it because that's not something I feel comfortable having a generative AI tool doing. Hope that helps.
I also get asked if I know any good or ethical ways to use AI. And this is a hard one to answer because ethical thresholds vary by person. The number one thing that everyone can do to use AI in a slightly more ethical manner is what I mentioned before. If you are going to be adding an AI tool to a meeting, make sure that you're getting consent from the people in the meeting. Also make sure you're getting consent when you are connecting any of your clients or customers' data and accounts to an AI tool. I work in SEO, and there was a period a few months ago where a lot of professional SEO people were excited to learn that you could connect your Google Analytics account to an AI tool and get it to chat with you about the data and make graphs, and people thought, oh, this is going to make our work a lot easier. But the issue is, a lot of times there were multiple clients' companies' data in that analytics tool, or maybe just a single employer's data in that analytics tool. And when people were connecting it, they don't own all of the websites that were in their analytics tool. So it becomes a privacy and consent issue. Did you get consent from all of the companies whose analytics accounts you have access to and tell them that you were going to feed their data into an AI tool? If not, that can be an ethical, moral issue. Next, think about copyright. AI models are typically trained on copyrighted. I personally don't know of any generative AI model that has not been trained unethically on copyrighted data, which is something to consider. And consider how you feel about that. Where does that sit with you? Finally, there is the question of the environment. AI companies are building giant data centers, which are essentially large warehouses filled with computers in areas that are already often struggling to maintain appropriate drinking water levels. So a lot of times they build these data centers in very dry, arid areas. You're not going to build it right by the ocean where all the salt's going to get to it. These data centers require fresh water to flow through them to cool all of the computers because they get very hot. So these communities are already maybe struggling to maintain fresh water, especially in an area where they don't get a lot of rain and the groundwater might be drying up. And these companies come in and they are using the water to cool it. These facilities also add a lot of noise and light pollution to the communities where they're built. They're huge, so there is some environmental destruction in terms of building them. And they also suck up a lot of energy. If you have a warehouse full from floor to ceiling filled with computers, that's going to use a lot of electricity costs. So people who live in proximity to these data centers are finding their utility costs going up. Some companies like Microsoft are looking at building or reactivating entire nuclear power plants to power their AI computer needs. One example is the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant in Middletown, Pennsylvania. That was the site of a pretty bad accident that happened in the 1970s, and after that, half of the power plant got shut down. Only half of the power plant continued to work, and a few years ago, the owners of the power plant decided to decommission it. And decommissioning is when they start the long, multi-year process of turning off a nuclear power plant and securing all of the fuel rods. And that process has never actually been reversed. But Microsoft decided that they would like to buy 3 Mile Island, this power plant in Pennsylvania, and start reversing the process of decommissioning. So they're going to recommission it and use it for strictly to power Microsoft AI data centers. Next, I also get asked, are there any companies that are using AI in a decent way? So I talk a lot about why there's issues with AI, but it can be helpful for accessibility and learning and planning. But a lot of what's commercially available to us is rife with some of the issues I've discussed above. Don't be misled by tech leaders. A lot of them talk about something called AGI, Artificial General Intelligence, and say that this is going to be the future, this is going to be the way forward, but AGI doesn't actually exist. It is the stuff of science fiction. Some of these people who run AI companies are saying it's going to be here by 2027. That is not the case. It is not. We are not anywhere close to AGI, and in fact, the more AI content that gets put on the internet, the more AI tools scrape up that data and learn from it. And when AI learns from AI generated content, it actually makes the AI worse, not better. So we are not headed in the right direction to have AGI there. If you do want to use AI, there are some slightly better options, but do remember that some of the ethical points I mentioned previously still apply. So Cloudflare is one of them. Cloudflare is actively using AI to fight the AI scraping of copyrighted content and websites. So if you add Cloudflare's AI protection to your website, it will actually use AI to generate a web of pages that trap AI companies' crawlers and prevent them from scraping your unique content on your website. I do think that's pretty cool. Proton, which is a privacy-friendly suite of products based in Switzerland, they have introduced a privacy-focused AI tool called Lumo. There are still potentially some environmental and social issues at play here, but your data is supposed to be safer when using Proton Lumo instead of something like ChatGPT or Claude. ClickUp and Apple are two companies that have AI features, but you have to knowingly opt into them. You have to click a button that says, yeah, I want to use Apple Intelligence, or yeah, I want to pay an extra $30 a month fee to use the ClickUp Intelligence. It's not automatic, and that's what we want to see. You know, the alternate being companies like Microsoft, which just shoehorned Copilot into the full Microsoft Office 365 suite of apps, like a new, bigger, more intrusive version of Clippy. And they don't let you turn it off, and in fact, they charged everyone more for it. My Microsoft subscription went up 20% this year, so I canceled it. So we'd like to see folks like ClickUp and Apple who are setting up AI so it's an option that you can opt into, versus companies like Microsoft where it is AI becomes the default and you either have to opt out or you can't opt out at all.